This is the Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
They call me crazy cause I'm facing all my giants. They try to scare me into thinking I can fight it. They tell me I should never even think of trying. But that's just me, I'm gonna live out in defiance.
Hey Alphas, ignore Stacy Eating. Today we've got a very special guest joining us to talk about his new film, The American Revolution. Over the last nearly 50 years, I don't remember all of it, this gentleman has produced some of the most iconic documentaries about American history, including the Civil War, not just a Guns N' Roses song, and the Vietnam War, which is not a song at all that I know of. I'm sure it is. His work is so recognizable, though, he's become a household name. Yes, Ken Burns is in the house.
Nice. Joe, do you know what the Ken Burns effect is?
You know, if you'd asked me a week ago, I would have said no, but I've done a little bit of reading on it. But I want to hear your take.
Well, the Ken Burns effect is pretty popular for those of us who are in the photo/video industry. It's actually like this panning effect with still images. The Ken Burns effect is a video post-production technique that adds a slow, subtle, continuous panning and zooming motion to still images to help guide the viewer's eye to a key point, so you can hone in on that particular visual narrative. While Ken Burns did not invent this particular method, he used it in a significant way throughout his work, and thus people call it the Ken Burns effect. Oh, you were going to add something?
Well, yeah, but it's a sort of a detour, so I'll let you finish what you were saying.
Well, I'm going to go on a completely different direction, so if you want to stay in that
All right. So a friend of mine and I were goofing around doing like some voice stuff, and he wrote up this thing called Letters from the Rear. And it was, usually it's like letters from the front line. And it's got like guitar music in the background. And the way I visualized it was literally panning over like poorly drawn, like crayon pictures. And so little did I know, 8 years ago when I was goofing around with this Letters from the Rear concept, I was practicing in my head the Ken Burns effect.
You got it. Sounds like you're leaps and bounds ahead.
It's the only leaping and bounding I do these days.
Here's something interesting that I found, that Ken Burns works almost exclusively with PBS, and another person who works exclusively with PBS is this wonderful gentleman who does like background checks, or not background checks. That sounds too criminal. It's called Finding Your Roots, this show on PBS. I'm sure you guys watched it or you're familiar with it. And it's where they sit down with an individual and they go back into their family tree and they dredge up a bunch of really interesting people. Maybe the guest doesn't even know who these family members are. Well, Ken Burns went on this particular show and found out that he had an American Revolution soldier in his background by the name of Dr. Gerardus Clarkson. And he served, he was born in 1737 in New York City. He became a medical doctor. He served on a floating battery, Putnam, in Pennsylvania State Navy, and was the surgeon for the Board of War in the American Revolutionary War from 76 to 77. And so I guess he went on to be like this prominent Philadelphia physician. And
with a name like that, I think you just get a doctorate. I don't think you'd even have to do anything.
Gerardus.
I would trust anybody that grew up with the name Gerardus. Like, that guy's been through some things.
Apparently, it's Ken Burns' fifth great grandfather, which
that's cool.
I have a couple, if not a few, revolutionary patriots in my background. One of them that I really honed in on, with the help of the Daughters of the American Revolution, was John Thompson. He was a sergeant of artillery from Worcester, Massachusetts. Well, I should say, in that vicinity that's where he served for 3 years, from April 1777 to April 1780. And he was with the 3rd Regiment of the Artillery of the Massachusetts Line. And he served under Captain David Cook, Captain Burbank, and Colonel John Crane. One thing that was pretty interesting was that he participated in the Battle of Monmouth. Are you familiar with that? You were there, right? Battle of Monmouth?
I was on the outskirts. I was a little slow. I was behind everyone else.
So the Battle of Monmouth took place on June 28th, 1787, and it was the longest and largest single day of battle in the American Revolution, where the newly trained Continental Army under General George Washington clashed with Sir Henry Clinton's British forces. And although it was a tactical draw, it was strategically a victory for the Americans because it proved that the Continental Army could stand up, or at least stand equal to the British after they trained up at the Valley Forge location. So
Interesting. Uh, so George Washington was known as a really good general, but it wasn't necessarily just because of his ability to fight. He was really good at keeping people alive. Which sounds like, oh, well, that's like winning a battle, right? No, not necessarily. He could get out of a battle with more people than anybody. So he always had a fighting force because he could retreat out of a battle. And, some people would lose 30-40% of their people trying to get away. And he just had the ability to safely get people out of a battle that wasn't leaning their way. So, you don't just beat George Washington once, you got to beat him a few times.
I will say, while he could retain personnel, he could not retain his teeth. And I'm told that he had a set of wooden dentures, which were pretty painful. Anyway, all joking aside, I watched, Ken Burns has this big Revolutionary War documentary coming out. That's why he's going to be on the show today to talk about that. And I watched it, and I found out a lot of really, really interesting things, which I don't want to give spoiler alerts here, but the one fun fact that I walked away with was that George Washington kind of resented the fact that he had to feed his soldiers' wives and hangers-on, because he was struggling enough to feed his own army, let alone he had to feed them. But he worried that if he didn't keep them or their morale up, he would lose his army. So it makes sense. He needs a morale tent. That's what he needs.
I always wondered, like when these people that do documentaries, and I'm sure it's different for everyone, but I'm really excited to find out whether he knew a bunch about this and decided to do a documentary and then learned more, or whether it was like, this is something that I want to know more. Let's make something incredible. Because that's what I would do if I was like, hey, I want to know everything there is to know about the Cherokee Native Americans. So I'm going to do a documentary on the Cherokee Native Americans. And I would go in it not even knowing a single Cherokee word. But by the end of it, the goal being, I know as much as you could possibly learn.
Maybe. Well, we'll have to ask him.
Remind me to ask him that. It's on you if it doesn't happen now.
Okay.
All right, Alphas, please stick around. We'll be back with our wonderful guest, Ken Burns, right after the break.
Join me in the American Legion's year-long celebration of our nation's 250th birthday. We're celebrating America with USA 250 Challenge. What is the challenge? The USA 250 Challenge is built on three important features we know well: physical activity, mental wellness, and community service. Join the challenge today. Visit legion.org to learn more and register for $30. For your registration fee, you'll get to choose a commemorative t-shirt while supporting Veterans and Children Foundation. I look forward to celebrating this special birthday celebration with you.
All right. Now that we're done with talking about quilts, today we're joined by the Ken Burns. His films have been honored with dozens of major awards, including 17 Emmys, 2 Grammy Awards, and 2 Oscar nominations. In September of 2008, at the News and Documentary Emmy Awards, Ken was honored by the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences with a Lifetime Achievement Award.
In November, you're too young for that, Joe.
Yeah. I want when I accepted it, I said I want to, because with tough times, it was the 2008 meltdown. I said I want a half Lifetime achievement.
There we go.
What are you guys trying to say here?
Lifetime achievement. It's not over. I've got work to do.
And then in 2022, you were inducted in the Television Academy Hall of Fame, which tells me again, they're trying to get rid of you. Be careful.
Yeah.
There's no getting rid of no.
So what I have in my kitchen, I can't reach it right now, but it's an old New Yorker cartoon, and it shows 3 guys standing in hell, the flames licking up around them, and one guy says to the other 2, apparently my over 200 screen credits didn't mean a damn thing. And I have that there every day to remind me, and all of that stuff that you list plus 50 cents gets you a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Well, we're super glad to have you at the Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
Where me, myself,
The collective, the royal.
right. Well, we got rid of royalty in the American Revolution, so I really blew that. But the me, myself, and I, very loud and complicated up here, are thrilled.
A loyalist or a patriot? Obviously,
Patriot. I did find deep in my, Skip Gates did the Finding Your Roots thing with me many years ago, and was able to, through mitochondrial DNA, link me to Robert Burns, the poet, which I'd never been able to do. And I'm fourth cousin of Abraham, all this stuff. I had someone who enslaved people, which I wasn't surprised about. The really bad thing is that despite lots of patriots, on my mother's side, there's a guy named Eldad Tupper that refused to sign the loyalty oath and moved to New Brunswick. And to me, that was like crushing. I thought, Eldad, what a great name for a dog. No more.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show, Ken. I'm
Thank you, Stacey.
To have you here. And I want to start a little bit by getting to know you. We're all familiar with you. You're a household name. So I want to kind of get to know the person behind what people normally see. And after digging a little bit, I found out that your dad was he an amateur photographer or a pro photographer? Somebody who
amateur. He's an anthropologist, cultural anthropologist, but he took pictures. And my first memory is of him building a darkroom when I was 2.5 in a tract house in a development in Newark, Delaware. He was the only anthropologist in the entire state of Delaware. But that's my first memory and then of the magic of sitting in his arm, being held in one arm as he's turning, the smells and this magic taking place. It was great. So I've got that in my DNA.
I was going to ask, I was a combat photographer in the military. And so seeing that little snippet of your dad's past made me wonder, did he pass the bug down to you? Is that what got you into wanting to do documentary work? Or
it's so complicated. I mean, in a real basic way, yes. So I got a Brownie camera early, and I thought I'd be that. But my mom was sick the whole time, from when I was 2 to when I was 12. Oh, she died when I was 11, just a few months short of my 12th birthday. And after she died, my dad had a very strict curfew. But for some reason, on school nights for me, he would let me stay up late, sometimes till 1 a.m. with all the commercials to look at old movies. And it was the first time I'd ever seen my dad cry, not when she was sick, not when she died, not at this impossibly sad funeral. And I remember him crying at a movie called Odd Man Out about the Irish Troubles and in the 19-teens and 20s. And I just remember saying to myself, I'm now 12. I want to be a filmmaker. It provided my dad with an emotional safe haven.
Oh my goodness.
And that's what I wanted to do. And so that meant Hollywood. I went to Hampshire College in Amherst, Massachusetts, and all my teachers were social documentaries, still photographers, got back interested in that, and documentaries. And then somewhere along the line, by the time I was 22, it had merged with a completely untrained interest in American history. Like I've always loved the questions, the stories, the parts, difficult and otherwise, of our country. And so all of a sudden by 12, I knew what I wanted to do. By 18, I knew what kind of film I wanted to make. And by 22, it was American history. And so you're looking at a 72-year-old, pathetically 50 years later, who has not deviated from that course.
Yet.
yeah.
He's going to decide he wants to break wild ponies.
My dad was a rifleman and an engineer in the Rangers in World War II. Landed after in early 45, but he was apparently an incredible marksman. That I don't know about, whether I've inherited any of that.
Did you talk to your dad a little bit about his experiences?
Yeah, he did not see combat because he got into Le Havre in France at about April of 45. He ended up occupying as a 19-year-old Krupp's Essen mansion with a few other guys, and had as a 19-year-old turning 20 in June of 45, had the good sense to soak the labels off the wine bottles from one of Europe's greatest wine cellars. And when my dad passed away, I found this book of all of the labels of what must have been the greatest wines, right? I mean, Krupp is going to have that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
wow.
he liberated some other interesting things from
Spreading democracy,
Yeah.
one bottle at a time.
One bottle at a time.
I think those are called war treasures.
Yes, indeed they are.
War booty.
Well, oh, that's incredible. We never really know how deep somebody's willing to get. And so I always have like sort of a deeper backup question. And I do want to lean into that because I think that you seem like the kind of guy that gets what I'm trying to say when I ask this question. So, from Civil War to Vietnam War, you explore these lasting scars of conflict, not just on our country, but on the individual. And as somebody, like yourself that's interviewed countless veterans for your projects, my easy question was, why do you feel that push and desire to share those specific stories? How did you land on, America in the way that you did? And then my deeper question is it the history that you want to share and hope that people draw their own lessons from what they see? Or is there something more specific that you hope people get from the stories of those who wore the uniform?
Wow, that's a great question, Joe. So after we did the Civil War series, which I had to do because I saw that it was the determining factor, the most important event in American history once we'd gotten started, and everything issued from it. My first film on Brooklyn Bridge, the new metal called Steel, which the Civil War promoted. Second film on the Shakers, a celibate religious sect that died out after we murdered 650,000, 700,000 of our own people. And the question of the soul's survival wasn't as big a deal in the last half of the 19th century. History of the Statue of Liberty, which was originally intended as a gift from the French to Mrs. Lincoln to commemorate the survival of the Union besides her husband's ultimate triumph. The Congress, obviously its most important moment when there were two Congresses, one in Washington, D.C., the other in first Montgomery, and then later Richmond, Virginia. So it's just a big, big moment. And afterwards, I just looked at everybody. I said, no more wars.
Yeah.
Like it was just too much. When people in the Civil War, both North and South, had been in combat, and as you know, not everybody's in combat, right? It's a fairly small subset of people who actually see combat and certainly regularly. But when they'd been in it, they said we'd seen the elephant. And I assume that means it was the most exotic thing you could imagine. It's trying to tell you, everybody else, has no idea what this is like. And so I said, we haven't seen the elephant, but we know what they meant. We felt their pain and we understood, looked at the gory photographs and the cost of war. So no more. But then at the end of the 90s, Civil War came out in 1990. At the end of the 90s, I learned that 1,000 veterans of the Second World War, American veterans, were dying every day. Mm-hmm. That is no longer the case. It's down to single digits, right? And that this impossibly large percentage, I can't remember exactly what it was, of graduating high school seniors, that means with diploma in hand, marching off the thing, thought we fought with the Germans against the Russians in the Second World War. And I said, F, no way, I've got to do something. And so we tried, this is the only subject that I've ever done that had lots of brethren, hundreds of World War II movies. But I thought, what if we saw the greatest cataclysm in human history through the eyes of people who lived in 4 geographically distributed American towns: Waterbury, Connecticut, Mobile, Alabama, Sacramento, California, and tiny, tiny Laverne, Minnesota. The other three, about 100,000 in 1941. This one has 3,000. Okay, so we do that. That takes us more than 7 years. But before the ink is dry on that, I looked at everybody. I said, we're doing Vietnam. And there was, I knew I couldn't no longer keep that ban because it obviously exposes the best and the worst of us, as all the cliches that we say about war. But it's really fundamentally a portal into human behavior, experience, and that good and bad stuff. Yeah. Before the ink was dry, in December of 2015, before the September 2017 broadcast of Vietnam, I said, we're doing the revolution. And I knew how difficult it was going to be. No photographs, no newsreels. Everybody thinks nothing happened. It was this, peaceful thing. This is a civil war that's proportionally as bad as our Civil War. And our Civil War isn't really a civil war. It's a sectional war. Civil wars mean lots of civilian deaths. There's almost no civilian deaths outside of Missouri and eastern Kansas in our Civil War. It's just a sectional war. But man, the loyalists in everything, and the killing patriots and patriots killing loyalists, and the disaffected, those who wanted to just not just like hunker down, who are distrusted by both. It's really bad. There's some battles in Southern theaters where there may be a British officer leading the loyalists, right? But everybody who's killed in this battle, Kings Mountain, that's in North Carolina, just over the South Carolina border, everybody else is an American killing another American. And what happens in New Jersey, and particularly New Jersey and South Carolina, is as bad as you could possibly imagine. And I just wanted to communicate. I think most people don't trust to the ideas. They think, we got to protect the ideas. It's just great thoughts in Philadelphia. Plus, they're all wearing stockings and breeches and wigs, and so we can't know them. But in fact, those big ideas are not diminished. They're in fact enlarged by understanding the cost. And last April, 250 years ago, last April 19th on Lexington Green, the chances of our success is 0. 6.5 years later, in October of 1781, at Yorktown, it's 100%. And don't you want to know how that happens? And don't you want to know not just the top down, but, the Washington, who's the most important person, and the Jeffersons and the Adams, people we kind of know about, Abigail Adams. But what about a little girl 10 years old from Yorktown? What about a 14-year-old volunteer for the Patriots from Boston, or a 15-year-old for Connecticut? What's the biggest battle of the Revolution? Battle of Long Island, where George Washington makes a terrible mistake and leaves his left flank completely unprotected, and the British take advantage of it. What's the Battle of Brandywine? A big set piece. He leaves his right flank unprotected. So here you've got the greatest guy, most important, but he also is flawed. And so we wanted to, we introduce you to literally dozens of characters in the American Revolution. They're wives of German Hessian soldiers arriving to triumphantly join Burgoyne's army as it wins at Saratoga. Oops. And who is the great hero of Saratoga? Benedict Arnold, our general, right? And it's only, you meet him in the first moments of episode 2, and it isn't till well into episode 6, the last episode, that you find out what it is. And then he escapes. His conspirator, Major Andre, who's in the British Secret Service, is caught and hung as a spy. But, and I'm glad you're all sitting down, Benedict Arnold then joins and creates a loyalist regiment called the American Legion.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert, goes to Virginia and wreaks havoc until he suddenly realizes that everybody is now focused on him. He's been injured twice in the service of the Patriot cause, his same leg. And so everybody's saying, we'll take the leg and give it a military burial. And the rest of him,
Is that what happened to you, Joe?
I actually have a leg that, what they do military burial, they just loaded me up in the back of a Humvee and drove me back home. But same thing.
Same thing. It's really pretty amazing. And I think, we have this cast that The Longest Day doesn't have as great a cast as we have. Meryl Streep.
Your voice actor, who is that? Holy cow.
We have dozens of voices that are the finest actors, reading the first person letters, making people come alive. Paul Giamatti reprises as John Adams. Claire Danes is Abigail Adams, but Laura Linney, who was Abigail, has many different voices. We've got Tom Hanks, we've got Meryl Streep, we have
so many recognizable voice actors.
And they're all off camera, and they're all taking that stuff. So suddenly, the wig business, the separation of paintings, we've followed lots of reenactors, but very sort of impressionistically. I can't wait for you to see this thing, because I think it takes the onus off. I think the barnacles of sentimentality and nostalgia have encrusted the American Revolution, and that we need to just say, this is what happened. That people say Ecclesiastes, that's the Old Testament, said there's nothing new under the sun, meaning human nature doesn't change. There is something new under the sun. The most important event since the birth of Christ is the American Revolution, that said you are no longer subjects. There are going to be a few people on earth who are citizens, and that's a huge responsibility. And when they say pursuit of happiness, they don't mean whatever you want to do, the acquisition of things in a marketplace of objects. This is lifelong learning to earn the virtuous reward of citizenship. And so I think particularly now when people are worried about the future of the American experiment, to go back to the opening moments and understand the sacrifice. I mean, we always think the sturdy militiamen, they were often the least reliable soldiers that Washington had. It was these kids. It was these ne'er-do-wells. It was these felons. It was these second and third sons who didn't have a chance of an inheritance. There were women dressed as men. There were recent immigrants from Ireland and Germany. They did the fighting. And there's a couple battles, one in South Carolina in Cowpens, where like Daniel Morgan, who's their commander of Virginia, uses tactics that plays into Cornwallis's, and in this case is Tarleton's, understanding of how the militia dissolves. So he puts the militia guys in the two front lines and says, just fire twice. That's all I ask. Just fire twice. Sometimes they didn't fire at all. Sometimes they just ran. Whatever. Promise me you'll fire twice. They fire twice and then retreat. Just run behind us. The second line, do the same thing. Fire twice. Run behind us. And Tarleton is saying, okay, we got him wrapped up. And then over the ridge are the Continentals. These kids, these, the people who stuck it out, who, this was not originally, democracy wasn't the object of the revolution. It was a consequence of it. Because in order for these patricians, the Washingtons and the Franklins and the Adamses to win, they had to begin to promise regular people rights. And so these are the people that stayed with Washington, didn't go home to plant a crop, didn't bail at the first sign of fire. It is so inspiring. It is so interesting. And we, this was a rabble. We were called the rabble by the Germans. He says, one guy, we follow a German guy named Johann Ewald. He's completely contemptuous in the beginning. And at the end at Yorktown, he's part of the surrender. He says, this rabble, who would have thought 100 years ago this rabble could defy kings? That's us, guys.
Well, I am proud to say that my 7 times great-grandfather was a terrorist or a patriot, depending on which side of the fence.
Depends on who wins.
They didn't use terrorist, they said rebel. Everybody, the British and the Loyalists called everybody who's a patriot rebels. So.
Okay. Well, I definitely come from good rebel stock.
Yeah.
He was a sergeant, an artillery sergeant out of Massachusetts.
Yeah, it's great.
Fought in the Battle of Monmouth. But I also discovered, because of your Finding Roots episode, that you also had a patriot, Dr. Gerardus Clarkson.
Yeah, and he, with Benjamin Rush, started one of the first medical colleges in the United States in Pennsylvania.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. Lots of patriots all up and down the line. I'm happy to say, let's forget about L. Day.
We won't mention that name. Not even good enough for a dog. Okay, so I was lucky enough to watch some of the film, several hours actually, because I couldn't put it down. And what I really appreciated about it was, as you said, it's not a time where pictures existed, but you guys did an incredible job of supporting it with graphics, with really skillful voiceovers, as you said. But I think what was astounding was the beautiful cinematography that you had incorporated, and you included footage from all 13 original colonies. What was that travel like? It took almost a decade to do this film, right?
Yeah. So it'll be, when it's broadcast, it'll be 9 years and 11 months. So the idea was, I've not been a big fan of reenactments. My feeling is, if you're doing reenactments, you might as well do a feature film, right?
Right.
I'm not in the feature film business, but I knew I had to do that. I had to film people who dressed in French soldiers, as German Hessians, as British soldiers, as cavalry, as militia, as Continentals, as Native Americans. There were black soldiers, fighting for the British, and black soldiers fighting for the American. I mean, it's really an interesting dynamic. And so I didn't want to go and say, you mentioned the Battle of Monmouth. I didn't want to go and say, let's reenact the Battle of Monmouth, right? Let's just go down there, film in New Jersey in the Pine Barrens and shoot on a super hot day. But let's take back stuff that just becomes, with all the other stuff we've shot over years and years and years, just grist for the mill. So it's like when I'm making the film on World War II, I go to the National Archives and I say, what do you got on World War II? And they say, what part? And you say, I'm interested in this. So we began to blend it in with the maps. I love maps, and I've had them in almost every film I've made. And there are more maps in this one film than in all the other films that I put together combined, because people want a sense of what actually happened. And if you now know this little girl or this little boy who's in the fight, it gives you a different kind of relationship to that arrow, the blue arrow for the Patriots, the red arrow for the British or the Loyalists, whatever it might be. It's so important to us to make it come alive and take off the onus. It really helps if you see these reenactors, just their feet going through mud that sucks down, opening of our 4th episode is sucking down a foot. And it's really happening to them. It's not just this sort of pristine reenactments. Oh, here we are. It's early in the morning. The light's weird. It's silhouetted, whatever it might be. And what it does is it gives you a tactile sense. So a feature film is going to have hundreds of soundtracks. Documentary, maybe 10 or 15. We have 250 soundtracks going in some of those battles because we want to treat it as if it's really happening. And what's been nice, I've been going around to film festival. I've done some screenings, of different things, and people are like, after the Battle of Long Island, as I said, the biggest battle, like my heart's pounding, they said, and it's not because I live in New York and my brother lives in Brooklyn and it's all the places where he is now that this battle took place, but it's that, you tell a good story. That's what I want to do. I want to take that onus off the powdered wigs and the breeches and the buckles on the shoes and the hose and all of that sense that
the oversimplification.
Yeah, and the sense that they didn't really experience stuff.
Yeah.
War has been bad since the first human being killed another one, and that's where you have to start with the fact that this is a really tough thing. Yet, this is the first revolution in history that came out proclaiming the universal rights of all people.
I think the other thing I appreciate about the film as well, Ken, is obviously, as you said, there was a lot of maps, but how much of a collaboration did you have with, say, the National Archives or the Smithsonian? Like, how did you go about sourcing these materials to be able to include them in this film and bring them to the layperson?
I am so glad you asked that. So we identified scholars. We may have 4 or 5 scholars who know a lot about Native American. It's a really important dynamic. A lot of scholars who know about the British Empire and their dependence on their other 13 colonies, which were way more profitable in the Caribbean because they depended on slave labor. People who are military historians, Rick Atkinson, who's written, 2 volumes of 3 about the Revolution, who's just amazing. A lot of other writers, but we also hired a cartographer, and we also had to. If you're looking at Boston today, the Charles River just goes like this. It was a huge, what's called the Back Bay, is all apartments and streets that are familiar to everybody who's ever been to Boston. That was not filled in. Boston looked like a little head at the end of a narrow isthmus. And so then you begin to understand oneth by land and twoeth by sea. You understand why your ancestor working for Henry Knox was able to get that artillery up into Dorchester Heights, and the British look up and go, we're out of here. The Patriots didn't have enough muscle to take over Boston. They could go in and out by sea, but they were blocked in. But the second we could bombard it, the game was over, and they headed to Halifax, Nova Scotia. So you understand the dynamics of that. And so we were literally all that time is us trying to get that map right, trying to get this fact right, trying to not put your thumb on the scale, just like umpires call balls and strikes, like not make loyalists bad. A loyalist is a conservative. A loyalist is saying, hey, the British constitutional monarchy is the greatest government ever invented up till now. And they're absolutely right. It is. It's not like being a French citizen, which is abject, the monarchy is abject authoritarianism. But the British Constitution, that's a good system. We're just invented a better one. And you have to decide whether you want to go with this completely untested idea or you stick with the old thing. So a loyalist is not a bad person per se. And so we follow throughout loyalists. And as I said, German soldiers and their wives and British kings, prime ministers, ministers there, and native people. It's such a great cast of figures, and it doesn't make it complicated. It makes it interesting. Like if everything was black and white in, say, the TV series Succession, no, it wouldn't be successful. It's the fact that people have within them, different things. Look at Benedict Arnold. He's next to Nathaniel Greene. He is Washington's most reliable soldier. until he's not.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is just a fascinating, he's almost a character. You forget that he's human.
He's a human being, right? I remember I made a film on Huey Long, the turbulent Southern demagogue. It got accepted at the New York Film Festival. And I'm walking out, and this woman, Upper West Side of New York, probably a Jewish woman, she said, "You should do a biography of Hitler." And I said, "Why would you want me to do that? I'd have to make him a human being." Right? And right now, it's almost, not right now, but anytime, it's almost better to have him as this symbol of pure evil. But, Washington's deeply flawed. He's rash. He rides out on the battlefield at Kips Bay. His aides are going, "No, no, no." And they're grabbing the reins of his horse and pulling him back, because if he's killed, it's over. It's dead. At Princeton, does the same thing, and an aide is putting his hand over his face. I mean, he's unbelievably brave, and has been since he's a 22-year-old militiaman that probably fired the first shot of the 7 Years' War, what we call the French and Indian War. He may have started it by firing into an encampment of French and their native allies to begin what we call the French and Indian War. Later on, has to surrender. Later on is, Braddock's aide de camp. Braddock is killed, arrogantly thinks I can handle any French and Native American. He's ambushed. Washington executes, it says 2 bullets fly. He's 2 horses shot out from under him, bullets pierce his jacket, and he executes a retreat and gets everybody else off. And they won't give him a commission in the British Army. So he's like, okay.
Talk about being petty. I mean, petticoats.
I get an American, right?
Yeah.
So you guys know this elementary. Let me do this quiz on you. Reverse question, right?
All right.
How are the patriots, rich and poor, all white men, dressed when they dumped the tea in Boston Harbor?
They were all dressed up like Native Americans, correct?
Yes, very, very good, Joe. You get at least temporarily A. Now, Joe, why were they dressed? Or Stacy, why were they dressed as Native Americans?
Were they trying to sow discontent of some sort, or throw off the British?
That would be what you'd think. They were saying to the British, and this is the great irony of history and the complication of it. They're saying, we're Aboriginal. We're Americans. We're no longer part of the mother
That's interesting.
country. And so they're not trying to blame it on the Native Americans. They're trying to say, like the Native Americans, we're different from you.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Meanwhile, the Native Americans over here, like,
meanwhile, they're going, "Excuse me, you've just taken our land. You're upset with Britain." The main reason they're fighting, not just taxes and representation and taxes on tea, it's mostly because the British have said, "We can't protect you, so don't cross over the Appalachians and take Indian land," which is what the smallest farmer wants to do and what the big land speculators want to do with tens of thousands of acres they don't own, like George Washington, like Benjamin Franklin, like Patrick Henry. They're all pissed because they can't go over and just take Indian land. So doesn't that make that so much more interesting, the whole dynamic?
Yeah.
The real question is, who wore it better? No. Actually, so in your film, The American Buffalo, which is, I've loved Native American culture my whole life. I say my whole life. Second grade, I did a report on Geronimo and found out that my family has some, not physically to me at least, on my father's side, has links to Cherokee blood. But that explores the near extinction of a species that's intrinsically linked to the history of the American West and Native American culture, of course. And I never knew how bad it was until I did my own research in high school for a paper. And so weirdly going into that, I knew a fair amount and was still blown away. So my question to you is, and I mentioned I told Stacy she had to remind me to ask you this, how much of it is you going, I want to know more about this, let's do a documentary, and how much of it is you knowing and needing to share? I'm sure it's a mix, but I'm curious.
95%. I need to know. 5%. This is what you should know. Because think about it. If it's the other way around, then it's homework, right? This is what you should know. But if it's me going, hey, let me share with you what I've just learned, then it's a story. There's no homework. There's no test on Tuesday. It's just like, something you can share. And the best thing, I mean, I did a conversation with Joe Rogan a couple months ago, 3 hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was going, oh, I had no idea. Oh, I had no idea. Oh, I had no idea, which is the greatest thing that you want to say, because he's well versed in stuff like that. He knows history pretty well. He's a curious guy, and most of the people we meet presume that they know some stuff about the revolution. And what I love is not disabusing of that, but just saying it's more. I'll tell you once, there's a deposed governor of Virginia. He's royal governor. He's in a ship in the Chesapeake Bay because the rebels control his province, his colony, our state, soon to be our state of Virginia. And he owns some slaves. He says, what if we just he issues a proclamation, we'll free the slaves of rebels, not of loyalists. How you tell the difference, I don't know. And if you come over to us, you can fight for us and we'll give you your freedom, right? It's a very destabilizing thing. The entire British economy is dependent on slave labor in the Caribbean and to a lesser extent in South Carolina and Virginia. And slavery is legal in every state, but the least profitable is Massachusetts and New Hampshire and places that just don't have slaves in that regard. And so it destabilizes the situation and makes a lot of people who are a bit on the fence go over to the Patriot side. So it gives some, historians the chance to say, it's all about slavery. It's not, but it's amazing thing. So here's what we do know. 20,000 Black Americans fought in the Revolution, 15,000 for the British, 5,000 for the Americans, because even with this promise of continued existence of slavery, they felt the cause right. Like there's a freed Black, there was a kid named James Fortin, who 9 years old, hears 2 days after the Declaration is signed, the first public reading in Philadelphia, and he never for a second doesn't believe that those self-evident truths aren't for him. He goes on, fights, is imprisoned. He has a chance to get out if he goes back to England with the ship captain's son and be fine. He goes, no, I'm fighting for my cause. He ends up in a prison ship, nearly dies, and then later becomes rich in the merchant marine and gives a lot of his profits to funding the beginning of the abolitionist movement in the 19th century. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
What an American.
Yeah, that's James Fortin. That's just one person. We follow a guy who left named Harry Washington. Guess whose plantation he was at? Mount Vernon.
Right? I was like,
he ends up in Africa in a new colony whose capital is Freetown, right? Because they're not welcome in Nova Scotia, where most of the loyalists go because it's cold and they're Black. And they're not so welcome in England either. So they end up going from Britain to, and that's just a couple of stories. I mean, it's just so interesting if you just say it isn't just, guys in Philadelphia thinking up great ideas. Do not misunderstand me. Those are the best ideas human beings have ever come up with. And our film celebrates them. In fact, exalts them. But this is called the American Revolution, meaning we're not going to pretend like it's just we fire some shots at Lexington, which is a bloodbath. The Americans are told to disperse. They start doing somebody fires and it's a massacre. And then it changes at Northbridge and Concord. And then the British are running. But it's bloody. I'll tell you there's an English historian in our film named Stephen Conway. At the end of the Battle of Bunker's Hill, which takes place, of course, on Breed's Hill, but we call it Bunker's Hill, Hal makes his final charge. Americans run out of ammunition and their guns are fouled from overshooting. They've inflicted 40% casualties on the British. The British Army will not experience 40% casualties again until 1916 and the first day of the Somme. Now, we think of World War I as the worst trench warfare, gut-wrenching kind of combat situations. Bunker Hill, right? And nobody said, don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes. They started off the first charge. They was wait till they're 90 yards out. The next is 50. The next is 30 just to save ammunition. But, we get distracted by the mythology and then we don't suddenly say 40% casualties.
Yeah.
Come on.
I mean, that's heartbreaking to imagine as somebody who served.
heartbreaking. And a British general was shot in the head, and he was the officer who had led the charge at Lexington and Concord. He fell into the arms of his son and died in his arms. Warren, who was the head of the Massachusetts Assembly, the most radical of all of them, was shot and killed, and he was stuffed in a mass grave by the British with two other rebels, where their seditious beliefs would be buried forever. So, I mean, this, if you personalize it, you do it from the top down, do it with the maps. Yes, Stacy, with the arrows. But if you know who's there, bottom up, and you know what their wife says when their body's brought back into Acton, Massachusetts, when you're the first American killed at the North Bridge, right? Isaac Davis, a gunsmith from Acton. You've already watched him at dawn leave kind of seriously, and his wife responding, to how serious he is, and then comes back along with the bodies of two other Acton fellow soldiers and buried. Their house becomes the place. Think of their children. Then you've got something that any one of us can hang on to. I remember after the Civil War series came out, this woman came up to me and said, "What are you working on next?" I said, "Oh, a history of baseball." And she goes, "Oh, my husband and son will like that." And so I turned to her and I said, "So you're a military history expert?" She goes, "Oh, no, but it was the stories." I said, "Look, I know your son and your husband are going to watch baseball. I'm making it for you. These are universal stories. These are stories about Americans dealing with stuff. Maybe it's a fastball, maybe it's a curveball, maybe it's a bullet, maybe it's a cannon. But these are big questions of human being. I don't need to tell you or your listeners who are the front lines of why we still are the greatest country on earth. And I should have led off by saying how honored I am to even spend a few minutes with you.
Oh gosh, the honor is ours.
We're seeing the energy, and you can tell when somebody's life is dedicated to something because they're the way they light up. And so, I don't. It's self-evident
I can, for one, appreciate your approach in humanizing these experiences, because I think we can all see ourselves reflected in that, and especially the alphas who are listening, who've had their own experiences through the military, where there are no winners in war.
Right.
And I think that gives you a better appreciation of other people's turmoil. And I know I kind of teased a little bit about calling my ancestor a terrorist, because depending on which side of the line you are, it's going to skew how you view it. But either side thinks they're supposed to be the victorious ones.
Robert McNamara told Curtis LeMay at the end of World War II that if we're the losers, we get hung as war criminals for the carpet bombing of essentially wood and paper Tokyo that killed, hundreds of thousands of people, well more than Hiroshima and Nagasaki, more than 1 million people. He said, we'd be war criminals and hung for what we'd done. And so it's one man's meat is another man's poison.
I will say this too, Ken. I've had a family member who's had skin in the game in every single era of war that you've covered in your films.
Wow.
So from the Revolution all the way forward, we got to get one on World War I. You didn't do one on that one yet.
You know what? I'll tell you that. That's a really good point. We've covered World War I in a lot of different films, from Hemingway, believe it or not, till jazz and baseball and other stuff. So we passed through it. World War I is, in a way, and this is where the isolationist movement in America started, is their war. Like, we came in and we were the difference and we won it for them, but it was their war in a way that World War II is not, in that we did come and win it, but mainly it was our manufacturing is the biggest cause of the winning of the Second World War. Second is Soviet sacrifice. Americans don't like to hear that. And third is the sacrifice of the Western European allies, including those people who landed at Omaha and Golden Sword that day. So, I mean, it's Utah and all the beaches there, Canadian and British and mostly Americans. And the Americans bore the brunt of it at Omaha, of course. And you go there and you just can't help but say they weren't getting paid. They weren't there for empire. There was no conquest. They were there for an idea that tyranny and authoritarianism is not the way of human progress. And that's why I can't even talk about it without breaking up.
Yeah, I mean, I've had my ancestors were from after Massachusetts, they migrated over to Michigan to do farming. So you talked about moving west.
Michigan too, Ann Arbor.
Yes, yeah, I saw that. I've got Harbor Springs. Oh, it's so funny. You talked about Laverne, Minnesota.
Yeah.
And I did the veteran. So after I got wounded, I started doing the Veterans Portrait Project, where I traveled to all 50 states to document veteran stories. And I went to Laverne, Minnesota, and I met this Korean War veteran named Arvin, and he lost almost his entire unit in Korea, and so they shipped him home. He said he landed in the middle of the night, and by the time he got back to the farm, it was like 5 a.m, and he was on a tractor harvesting by like 7 a.m. after coming home from Korea and losing. Anyway, this is the kind of mettle of the Americans that you document in your films, and I can definitely appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to sitting down and watching the rest of this film when it comes out. When are we expected to have this drop? Where can alphas watch it? Tell us all about that.
All of my films couldn't have been made without PBS, which is sorry that it's sort of under attack. They have one foot tentatively in the marketplace and the other proudly out, and it's where I've been able to do it. I could have gone to a streaming service or a premium cable and said, I need $30 million to make the Vietnam film, and they go, great, with your track record, here it is, right? But they wouldn't have given me 10 and a half years, which is what it took to get it right? So that's what PBS allowed. I had to raise all that money from them and from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which has just been zeroed out and is no more, but I was able to do it, right? So PBS will begin broadcasting this and streaming it for free on Sunday, November 16th. And it's going to be broadcast all that week, Sunday through Friday night. They'll rebroadcast it, do it in marathons on the weekends, rebroadcast in January. It'll be in pledge. It'll be going, and they'll have another national broadcast again in June before the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. It's going to be hard to miss. The DVDs and Blu-rays, if you know what those things are. There's a companion book by Alfred A. Knopf, which is the handsomest of all the companion books we've done. And we've done educational outreach. So any school that's interested in the American Revolution, whether it's 3rd grade, 5th grade, 8th grade, 11th grade, college, continuing education, they're not going to miss it. So I'm really hoping that everybody tunes in. Like, we're now so divided, but we share a lot of things in common. Like, I've made films for almost 50 years about the U.S., but I've also made films about us. That is to say, the lowercase, 2-letter, plural pronoun, all the intimacy of us and we and our, and all of the majesty, the complexity, the contradiction, and even the controversy of the U.S. And it is my great privilege to spend that time telling those stories. And I can't wait if we all watch this together, as it happened, remember, at the Civil War. Well, you're too young. At the Civil War series, the whole country stopped.
Joe was there.
That was the first one I watched, actually, was Civil War in the 90s.
Yeah. So it came out in September of 1990, and you're both too young to have stayed up, but the country stopped. And I'm really hoping we don't do that anymore. But I really hope in some ways, not for me, but for us to be able to all claim, regardless of what side of the political divide you're on, claim this extraordinary, the birth of our creation story, our creation myth, the moment that I am calling the most important moment since the birth of Christ.
Alphas, you can also get your passports and watch that on the PBS app. You can stream it beginning November 16th. If you want to watch it through your local, whether it's an ETV or your local PBS station, make sure you check your local listings.
It'll all be the same time. This one, they're going to show at the same time, I think.
Okay, great. Yeah. Perfect. And
they're going to show every episode twice. So on Sunday night, they'll show episode 1 from 8 to 10, and then show episode 1 again from 10 to 12. So you can go out and have a beer. You can come back and do it. You can go to bed early, and whatever it is, and they'll do that all week. So that's called a double pump.
Nice. And if you want to get your kids involved, sit down with a pitcher of lemonade, and every time they say General Washington, take a shot of lemonade. Have a little fun.
Exactly.
I can tell you, I was drunk. I was drunk on that sour goodness, watching just a few hours of it. But you can also find it probably on Apple TV, Amazon Prime. So just make sure that there's a bunch of platforms. It's going to be out there and pretty widespread.
It's going to be hard to miss. Yeah, we're going to have lots of partnerships with various places like Walmart that will permit us to sort of give point of sale things. It'll be good Christmas stuff. And it isn't just for dad. I think it's everybody's story. Like I've got 4 daughters, and a couple of them
Bless you.
grown. Yeah, isn't it the best? I'm rich in daughters. But my younger ones, I'll show them this stuff, and they're like riveted. And they'll go, whoa, and they like the maps. They like
There were women in espionage during the Revolution.
Indeed. In fact, they're perfect spies. Right?
Exactly.
It's
they can just live.
It's all the petticoats where we hide all the letters.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I do love a good petticoat.
Alphas, we're going to have links to where you can find more information about the American Revolution by Ken Burns. You can also be sure to check out pbs.org/Ken Burns /UNUM for more information there. Ken, as we wrap up, is there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to share with our audience?
Awesome. I'll just tell you that one of the first things we did in support of the promotion of this, which was way back last February, we went, as we always do, to West Point. And at lunch, where all 4,000 cadets are hooeying, we showed the opening quote by Thomas Paine about liberty and freedom and throwing off the feeble engines of despotism. And then 1,600 cadets came, and we showed them in an auditorium about 40 minutes of stuff. It was, as it was in the Civil War, as it was in World War II, as it was in Vietnam, one of the highlights of this tour. So I bless the folks who put on the uniform and service, and I think we've done a good job telling your story and understanding the difficulties of war and getting into just how bad it is, so it's not sugar-coated. I mean, soldiers always make the best peacemakers.
I will say that there's a request on Reddit, Ken, that you do a film about Ken Burns.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, that when
I'll play you. I'll need a wig.
Yeah, we'll call that When Hell Freezes Over. How's that?
Hell has frozen.
Yeah.
The pigs are flying, Alphas.
That's right. When pigs are flying. Exactly.
Ken, you're a real treat. Thank you for what you do for American history, for what you do for public television and filmmaking in general. And keep up the fantastic, incredible work and setting the bar high for all of us.
It's all back at you guys. That's the thing that we care about. And we're so grateful for your service, and we're so grateful for your sacrifice. Welcome home. Let us know what we can do for you.
Thank you so much for visiting us today, Ken. Alphas, please stick around for some Scuttlebutt after the break.
Discover the power of your voice and form a deeper understanding of our nation and the principles that shape it. As a participant in the American Legion Oratorical Contest, you'll develop a deeper knowledge of the U.S. Constitution and a greater understanding of the duties, responsibilities, rights, and privileges of American citizenship. As you step up to this academic speaking challenge, you'll learn leadership skills, the art of oration, and have a shot at winning up to $25,000 in scholarships. Seize your moment. Visit legion.org/oratorical and take the first steps towards shaping your future today.
Okay, Alphas, we hope that you had an absolutely stupendous break. And now it's time for Joe's favorite segment, the Scuttlebutt.
Scuttlebutt. Scuttlebutt. All right. Scuttlebutt. All right. I wanted to share a recent NPR article I found where Ken Burns called the elimination of federal funding for public broadcasting short-sighted, warning that the cuts will be catastrophic for new filmmakers and rural communities. He calls it a profound blow to what he says is a uniquely American institution. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting, CPB, and another agency that has felt the axe, the National Endowment for the Humanities, has been central to my origin story, Burns told Morning Edition. I wouldn't have been able to make any of the films without their support. So that early support, he said, helped attract foundations and underwriters that made it possible to complete films like Brooklyn Bridge, Huey Long, and the sixth film in the Civil War series. Even today, the CPB represents up to 25% of the funds for his project. Burns says. I'm less concerned with our ability to recover because we'll just redouble the efforts, Burns said. But the effect down the system for filmmakers is going to be catastrophic.
Agreed.
What a really great way of looking at it, because I think that an example would be I remember the first time when they were scanning prosthetics going through the airport. It did not bother me, because you know me, that they had my leg like flipped upside down and they were doing this in front of everyone while everyone was looking around the pretty 6-foot blonde to see what I was doing. So I had all these people looking at me, and what kept going through my mind is, I'm uncomfortable. This is going to really mess up somebody else's day.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kept thinking that, like, this can't be how they handle this from now on. This can't be how all this is handled. And I did talk to them about that afterwards, and they completely understood and apologized to me. But again, that wasn't my point. And to be able to think past yourself, because like he says, he knows what to do to recover on his side. But what happens to these young people who don't have the resources and the backing that he got because of this?
Well, that's people like me, Joe. I want to help veterans. I want to help the veteran community. And you know that my show on After Action is a PBS show.
Yes.
So I definitely understand what he's saying. While we're in our third season, I'm still very new to this approach and how to do fundraising. And that's what PBS helps us do as filmmakers, as people who want to give back to our community to help educate. That's what's tremendously important about PBS is hitting the markets that are underserved. And as Ken so eloquently mentioned at the very top of this news article, is the people who are going to be hardest hit are those who are underserved and then rural areas. But anyway, let's hear what else he has to say.
Well, I want to add on the back of that I think that PBS is one of the most American it's been a part of every single person's childhood that I know in one way or another.
Sesame Street.
Everybody. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, even to this day, my 3-year-old carries around 2 Elmos everywhere he goes.
Mr. Rogers.
And exactly. That's right. So, well, recently the House approved a Trump administration plan to rescind $9 billion in previously allocated funds, including $1.1 billion for the CPB, a move that cuts all federal support for NPR, PBS, and their member stations, and $7.9 billion in foreign aid. President Trump and most congressional Republicans contend that public media is biased and does not need federal funding. The House vote split largely along party lines, 216 to 213, with 2 Republicans joining Democrats in opposition, which doesn't sound like a lot, but the way that things are drawn out right now, that's a huge show of support for someone to cross lines in that vote. But Burns said the damage will be especially severe in rural areas where local stations may be the only source of news, educational programming, and emergency alerts. And that's really unfortunate, because these local stations are the least biased. They're not the ones that are creating narratives or trying to, primarily their funding comes don't come from the public like that. And so they're not trying to do gotcha stories or whatever. They're telling the news the way that I think all of us wish the news was being told. So public broadcasting is the Declaration of Independence applied to communications, he said. It's that central to our definition. Burns disagreed with arguments that public media is politically biased or unnecessary in this digital age. My own films, I don't have a political point of view in them, which is incredible, by the way. I call balls and strikes, he said, noting PBS's 32-year run of conservative commenter William F. Buckley's firing line. Mostly it's Sesame Street, American Experience, Nature, Antiques Roadshow, and Frontline, which may be the greatest television series of all time.
Yeah, and there's nothing, in my opinion, politically skewed about Downton Abbey. When you watch PBS and you're streaming Downton Abbey, I don't think you're thinking about politics whatsoever. Or when you're watching Antiques Roadshow. Are
you saying the bougie aren't politically? I'm just joking. Go ahead.
Oh, whatever. And After Action is a show that we created for veterans in our community and bringing communities back together. So there's nothing politically skewed about that, aside from wanting to bring Americans together and not divide them. But
continue to show support for veterans the way that you do.
Regardless of whether you or left, right, or down the center, or non-affiliated. We don't care. We care about the veteran. But anyway, thanks for sharing that. Appreciate it.
Of course.
I also have a scuttlebutt that's in honor of our esteemed guest. Of course, I took to Reddit to see what kind of Ken Burns rabbit hole I could get down, and boy, did I have some fun. The first post I found was titled, quote, "Once or twice a year, I get drunk and watch Ken Burns' Civil War. Does anybody else?" And of course, there were a lot. Now, I'm going to preface this. I don't come up with these people's handles. All right. They come up with them with themselves. But for me, part of the fun with the Reddit rabbit holes are the handles. So forgive me for some cursing that's going to happen. It's not my problem. Okay. So to respond to this post, at Crumario asked, like the whole thing? Yes, that's
Isn't there 9 episodes or something like that?
It's like an entire Lifetime documentary. And then at Fuckface59 added, "I wonder how many dudes force their girlfriends to sit through the entire film." Great question.
In that person's defense, they come from a long line of faces. I don't know if you know that. It's a long, strong line of faces.
Now,
Eventually you're going to run out of names.
Where does the 59 come from? Was it the year they were born? Were they born in 59? Or or are they?
I'm sure there's a sexual connotation that we're missing as well. I don't know.
I'm not even going to go there because there's 10 degrees off on that 59, my friend. Anyway, at Lester Green Jr. said, "I no longer drink, but I consider the documentary to be a masterpiece." You were absolutely right. The Civil War by Ken Burns is stupendous. At Chewing Gum on Table, ew, gross, shared, "Ah, man, I thought what would be Sullivan Baloo's bit, I'll get the Kleenex out." To which at Quality of Will responded, "Yeah, I know it was a little shockly or something, but it is such a beautiful, poetic piece of writing that I am genuinely moved every time I hear it. The combination of prose, the narration, the music are perfectly engineered to make me break." And at Chewing Gum on the Table followed up with, "I agree. I wish I could express myself even a tenth of the manner in which he does." For those of you who haven't watched Ken Burns' film, The Civil War, or are not familiar with Sullivan Balo, I don't know, I'm sure I'm saying that,
Baloo. I always thought it was Baloo.
Okay.
Whatever.
We'll go with that. We'll just say Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan. He was an American lawyer, a politician from Rhode Island, and an officer in the Union Army during the American Civil War. And he is remembered for an eloquent letter that he wrote to his young wife, Sarah, a week before he was mortally wounded at the first Battle of Bull Run. Sullivan was hit by a 6-pounder cannonball. Jeez, that sounds horrendous. It tore off part of his leg, and it killed his horse. Aw. I'm a horse lover, and that really shocks me.
Yeah, I'm a leg lover, and that got me too.
You can relate, I'm sure.
Yeah.
He was left behind by the retreating Union forces and died a week after the battle. He was buried in Sudley Church's graveyard. I'm not sure where Sudley Church is, but I'm sure it's nice. He was one of 94 men from the 2nd Rhode Island who were killed or mortally wounded at Bull Run. The battle in the area was occupied by Confederate forces, and Sullivan's body was allegedly exhumed, decapitated, and burned by Confederate troops. That's grim. Like, listen, I get that tensions are high, but that takes a lot of forethought to dig up some bodies, decapitate, dismember them, and then burn them. Anyway, his body was never recovered, sadly. A reading of the letter from Sullivan to his wife, who was 24 when he was killed, by the way, which is very young. It was included in Ken Burns' film, The Civil War. It's a tearjerker. Watch the film, grab your tissues, get after it, alphas. Anyway, back to Ken Burns. So at Clue, with like 7 U's, suggested, quote, "Definitely check out Ken Burns' Vietnam. That was the most haunting documentary I have ever seen." Oh my God. Schlong Carwai followed on his own comment with, "I do it with the Vietnam one, but yeah, any Ken Burns doc demands annual or biannual rewatches." At Obese Backgammon added, "Been waiting for the Revolutionary War doc. You can now basically do a whole U.S. history course by Ken Burns documentaries. This is absolutely true. Whether he'll be sober watching Ken's new film, he didn't say. We'll see. At Delta 632 stated, Ken Burns single-handedly justifies the cost of associated with a PBS streaming subscription. Absolutely. By the way, Alphas, if you don't have a PBS passport, it's really a nominal fee. I think I pay like $65 a year for PBS subscription, and it goes toward filmmakers like Ken Burns, like myself, and it helps out a lot. Anyway. So at Delta 632 goes on to say, that's not me saying it's not worth it either. His documentary content on that service and it being around $60 a year is a great value in modern times. You are absolutely right. Get out there, Alphas, get your passports. At Big Filet boldly stated of Ken Burns, that hair can't be real. To which, at Never Nude 666 said, I'd love to watch Ken Burns' documentary about Ken Burns. All right, Alphas, don't forget, the American Legion is on Reddit. I'm on Reddit. Get your butts on Reddit. Follow us. Go down the rabbit hole with me. It's a lot of fun.
Additionally, I do want to bring up the USA 250 challenge. It's been 250 years, and America, we've never looked better physically.
The wrinkles on your face prove that you've been at it for a while.
These are my crow's legs. These aren't crow's feet anymore.
Those are crevasses.
Crevasses. I'm so sorry. But you can actually go to legion.org/USA 250 challenge. And that is the website to find out more. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get people moving, baby. Whether it's volunteer hours, walking, running, fighting squirrels. I don't know if fighting squirrels is on there, but there are many options for you to get involved. And there's a t-shirt, and everyone likes t-shirts. So
I got my t-shirt. Mine's like a bright blue.
The blue, it looks incredible on you, by the way. That's definitely your color.
It is.
I'm more of a nude guy.
I heard that about you. I'm shirts, your skins. All right, Alphas. Thanks for listening. And get on there and get your passports. Watch this new documentary by Ken Burns. Get registered for the USA 250 Challenge. Get your steps in. Get your volunteer hours logged. You can subscribe to our podcast, our newsletter. Send us some mail guest recommendations at legion.org/Tango Alpha Lima. We're going to see you next week.
Next week. Take that.
Yeah, I think I like it.